370 of his co-workers have watched as others, temporary workers, entered this plant to do the work that was theirs.
When we first started out there, the company officials that did the hiring visited you in your home and talked to your family and all that kind of stuff and said, once you work for us, you have a job for a lifetime. And that's the way people went to the job, thinking that was, they were good on what they said. Well, the day of the lockout, we were in negotiations on the committee, of course, and along with some of the other folks that's here. And about 2 hours before the expiration of the contract, about 3 o'clock, we got word that our people were being escorted out of the plant, and the gates were locked, and that was it.
On June 15th, 1984, 370 members of Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers Local 4620 were locked out of their jobs at the BASF Corporation chemical plant at Geismar, Louisiana. This is their story, the story of their struggle for justice, for themselves and for their neighbors, in the longest lockout in modern U.S. labor history.
There's battle lines being drawn. Nobody's right if everybody's wrong. Young people speaking their minds are getting so much resistance from behind. Every time we stop, hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. What a field day for the heat. 1,000 people in the street, singing songs and carrying signs, mostly say hooray for our side. It's time we stop, hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going, we better stop. Hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going, we better stop now. What's that sound? Everybody look what's going, we better stop.
Louisiana. For almost 3 centuries, the people of this state have made their living from the land. And from the water that flowed through it. This balance changed after World War II with the birth of the modern chemical industry.
With the development of heavy industry, the chemical industry, not just chemical industry, but primarily chemicals, Louisiana then became more of a manufacturing state than an agricultural state. So the primary reason why they came, and I want to go back to it, was economics. It was natural gas and it was transportation. That was the prime reason for coming here. We have employment of about 37,000 full-time employees in Louisiana. We're the 3rd largest chemical producing state in the nation. That's after New Jersey, which is number 1. Texas is number 2. Louisiana would be number 3. So we are important to Louisiana's economy, very much so.
Today, 93 chemical plants stretch along the Mississippi River from Baton Rouge to New Orleans. Together, they account for 1/4 of the nation's petrochemical production. BASF AG, the largest German chemical manufacturer and the 2nd largest chemical company in the world, owns and operates the former Wyandotte chemical plant at Geismar, Louisiana. The Geismar plant is the largest of BASF's 80 facilities in the United States. Industry reports indicate that this one plant accounted for over half of BASF's profits in America. Geismar's 260 operators and 110 maintenance workers have been members of the Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers Local 4620 since the plant was built in the late 1950s. Early in 1984, BASF was in contract negotiations with OCAW.
Of course, when we got to the negotiating table in 1984, we were faced with a multitude of contractual changes, about 1.5 inches thick, which was to completely rewrite the entire contract.
Over the course of more than 60 negotiating sessions, BASF placed more and more conditions for settlement on the table. Union negotiators were buried under new company demands. Demands for the resignation of 110 maintenance workers to be replaced by contract workers, a rollback in wages and reduction of health benefits, the destruction of the seniority system, the right to replace any worker with a contract worker at any time for any reason. Richard Donaldson, employee relations manager for the plant, summed up BASF's position by saying, "When you work for BASF, you leave your constitutional rights at the gate."
Richard Donaldson was a spokesman for the group of company folks. He said, "We don't need a union out here. We don't intend to put up with this union anymore. We intend to get rid of it, and whatever it takes to get rid of it, we're going to do it." And I said, "Well, you got your work cut out for you, brother. You better get after it."
At that time, we had a Republican in the governor's mansion and a Republican in the White House. And Mr. Jenkins, several times during the negotiations prior to the contract expiration in '84, made the statement, "We got the stick, we're going to beat the shit out of you." And really, the economic situation was in the state of Louisiana, unemployment was the highest in the nation. So the economic stake being there was no jobs available for our people. He knew he couldn't strike. He knew that he could rely on the National Labor Relations Board to actually render decisions which would be favorable to companies. And the whole question of lockouts was up in the air.
On June 15, 1984, BASF's negotiators abruptly ended bargaining with the announcement that the 370 members of OCAW Local 4620 were locked out of the Geismar plant.
A lockout is when an employer refuses to let the employees do their jobs. In effect, it's a company strike where the company makes them withhold their labor. They're willing to work, they offer to work, and the company says no.
The lockout has become a favored tactic among Louisiana employers seeking to destroy their workers' unions, particularly the Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers, OCAW for short. The BASF lockout in 1984 was the 8th experienced by OCAW in Louisiana in a decade. Yet nothing in this past compared to the ferocity of BASF's attack on their rights.
What the company is offering us is it's a contract that if we sign, it gives them the right to just, when we go back to work, to give us our pink slips, to dismiss us right there on the spot. You used all of our savings. Things that we had invested money in and trying to build a nest egg for the future, we've had to liquidate that just to make ends meet.
Wife cries sometimes, get a little upset, and the little boy don't understand. He's only 4 years old, and he just can't comprehend what's going on. You go to work, you go to try and get a job, and they find out you work for Wyandotte, they don't want to hire you. And like for me, if I got cancer, they figure that's a higher risk, so they don't want to hire you. You go and try and get a low-paying job for $5 or $6 an hour, they don't want to hire you because you got too much experience, so you ain't got very much places to turn.
I never before had to tell my children no about just about everything they wanted to do, and everywhere they wanted to go, and they had got accustomed to certain things, and all of a sudden it wasn't there anymore.
Some of the families, their husband or the wife have become alcoholics. Some have had emotional breakdowns. It's been kind of rough, both emotional and financially.
A friend of ours got killed, and we couldn't even afford to send flowers. And it just was, it hurt. I mean, what's it all about?
I had a good job. I think that I did a good job. I think that it is that what they have done is immoral, and I believe it's illegal.
As the lockout dragged on, OCAW members and their families found that they had lost more than just their work.
'Cause I mean, you know, it's a contract that if we sign, it gives them the right to just, when we go back to work, to give us our pink slips, to dismiss us right there on the spot. You used all of our savings. Guess what?
found that they had lost more than just their work. People lost their life savings, their homes, their cars. Children had to drop out of college. Divorces broke apart families. In despair, some turned to alcohol, some to suicide. The growing human tragedy, the injustice of the lockout, did not go unnoticed. Loyola University's Institute of Human Relations condemned BASF's actions as immoral.
Look at how it demeans the individual. Look at what it does to their family. Look at what it does to their job security. Look at what it does to their medical benefits. Look at what it does to the public. All work situations must be measured by the degree to which they make a better life for the worker. The worker is not a servant of the system. The system must be a servant of the quality of life of the worker. What these corporations are doing is taking us down the exact opposite road. It's fundamentally a moral issue.
And I thought, doesn't this company understand the quality of its regular workers? And so I felt, I really felt a kind of horror, really, at the short-sighted destructiveness in this lockout. I don't know when I felt so clearly the presence of something very evil.
At the turn of the century, BASF and a few other German chemical companies dominated the world's production and distribution of synthetic dyes. In World War I, these companies, grouped loosely under the name of IG Farben, grew immensely rich supplying munitions produced from a new chemical process invented by BASF. BASF's wartime profits were further increased both through the manufacture and promotion of poison gas as a weapon of war. The rise of fascism in the early 1930s paralleled the rise of a revitalized IG Farben, organized around BASF as its center. In 1933, as part of an effort to make Germany independent of imported supplies of critical war materials, IG Farben executives sought and received huge government subsidies for the production of gasoline and rubber from coal. As wartime demands grew, Farben saw the need for further production capacity for both products. The location chosen for this new plant was designed to take advantage of a reliable supply of both labor and coal, and its distance from the Western Front of the war. The huge $250 million enterprise took its name from the concentration camp in Poland it was built next to. The 100% owned subsidiary was called IG Auschwitz. On April 12, 1941, the Farben executive in charge of the project, Otto Ambros, wrote his superiors, "Our new friendship with the SS is proving to be very profitable." At IG Auschwitz, prisoners were condemned to burn up their own body weight over a period of 3 months. Over 300,000 Auschwitz inmates worked at the plant during the war. It is believed 25,000 died on the job. The remainder, as they grew too weak to work, were exterminated at Birkenau, a nearby death camp, with the help of another Farben product, Zyklon B, the poison gas used to kill millions in the Nazi Holocaust. On November 20th, 1946, for these and other atrocities, IG Farben executives were tried as war criminals at Nuremberg. The prosecutor read the charges.
Atrocities and offenses, including but not limited to persecutions on political, racial, and religious grounds, murder, extermination, imprisonment, and other inhumane acts.
The Farben executives on trial claimed to know nothing about the atrocities at Auschwitz and other Farben plants. None would claim responsibility. Nonetheless, a dozen Farben executives, including IG Auschwitz founder Otto Ambros, were found guilty. All received sentences for war crimes, including slavery, spoliation, and mass murder. In 1971, Otto Ambros' son, Dieter Ambros, became president of BASF Wyandotte. On April 20th, 1979, Edwin L. Stenzel was appointed president of the company. Under his leadership, a program was begun to undermine and destroy unions at BASF. September 1979, BASF forced a strike at its Holland, Michigan facility that destroyed the workers' union. October 1980, an NLRB judge found BASF guilty of coercing and threatening workers in an organizing campaign in Anderson, South Carolina. March 1981, BASF ends an 8-month lockout of 350 OCAW members at Huntington, West Virginia. Only 200 are allowed to return. January 1982, BASF Chemicals illegally withdrew recognition from the workers' union at their Jamesburg, New Jersey plant. And over the last 4 years, BASF has destroyed union representation at its plant in Wyandotte, Michigan and Belvidere, New Jersey, and was found guilty of discriminating against union leadership at its plant in Rensselaer, New York. In a National Labor Relations Board proceeding contesting BASF's actions at Wyandotte, court documents revealed that orders for the nationwide union busting campaign came directly from BASF AG headquarters in Germany. Most of these anti-union tactics employed by BASF in the United States were outlawed in Germany when IG Farben was broken up following World War II. Today, BASF AG is the world's second largest chemical company, employing 130,000 people worldwide, with revenues of over $20 billion. BASF employs over 20,000 people in the U.S. alone. As recently as 1979, the year of Stenzel's appointment, 2,000 OCAW members worked under agreements with BASF. Today, that number is 200. The remainder have been locked out, laid off, or busted out of the union. The odds against the OCAW members were high, but they decided to fight back anyway.
Let the people decide at that time that we need to stick together, and we have up until this day, and if it takes 10 more years, I'm sure we'll still be stuck together.
We're suffering, but we're still together. You haven't beat us, you won't beat us. As long as we are right, we're gonna stay there. And we're here to let them know that they are wrong. We intend to fight them all the way to the cemetery, so to speak. They control everything but our lives and our destiny. They don't control that.
$370 families against a multinational giant. But they were not alone. They had their union. The OCAW Defense Fund helped them stay alive with money for food and rent. OCAW locals around the country adopted locked-out worker families. The OCAW National Headquarters launched a corporate campaign to end the lockout. And the fight not just to survive, but to win began.
Now the company's trying to take our jobs from us, and you and I need to join together. We must. Without our strength to see this through, brother and sister, we must stand true. It won't hurt, just
workers tried everything in an effort to regain their jobs and the rights and protections of a new contract. BASF refused, saying they wouldn't take the OCAW members back at minimum wage. At this point, BASF's true intentions became apparent.
Since this lockout has begun, has had one purpose in locking us out, and that is to break the union.
The company wants to operate this thing as they see fit without having to negotiate with a union or worry about grievances and such. They have said at the negotiating table that if you want to survive nowadays around here, you have to take what you can get. And the company is taking full advantage of that. BASF, they like to portray themselves as a good neighbor, but they're taking advantage of all their neighbors.
With the union contract, workers had the right to know and the right to say no. Because of the union, OCAW members had protection against arbitrary discipline or dismissal and could question unsound environmental and safety practices. Without union protection, the temporary workers had no such rights.
You know, if you rock the boat, so to say, you would, they may not get you on this issue, but they can nitpick enough to where they could probably find something wrong somewhere and harass you and, you know, get you discharged some way or another. Of course, guys with families, the older guys that were used to the bigger incomes and whatnot, you know, it's just rough. It's rough out there.
BASF's determination to exercise unilateral control of the workplace made the Geismar plant a particularly dangerous place to work.
I got to the point to where, you know, I felt at times they just didn't care. I went through one particular unit and I had a list of things that was, you know, pertained to safety. And it was so frustrating to try to get them to listen to it. And some of the stuff was very, very simple stuff that could be done. To remove hoses and whatnot, to build more hose racks and all. And it just got so frustrating, you just kind of give up.
And we feel that that the plant is just not being run safely because the people there are just not trained enough. They don't stay there long enough to be trained enough. In operations, there's a 38% turnover. In maintenance, there's a 100% turnover. And the longest that mostly anybody stays working for BASF in maintenance is no more than 6 months.
I had a UMC supervisor. I had asked him after one of my trainees had flunked out. I asked him about the fact that we was having a high turnover rate, and he told me that we had 10,000 names on file and that we could go through a person a day and still not run out.
Stephen Cate worked as a salaried chemical engineer at the BASF Geismar plant during the lockout.
When I went and was working in the polyol plant, I had an accountant that worked with me that I had to show what each different kind of valve looked like. You know, that a valve was, you found a fat spot in the line, you looked for it first, and if it didn't have a handle on it, it was probably a check valve, and look and see if there was an arrow on it. And, you know, if the handle was sticking up and went sideways, it was a ball valve, and these were the type of people that initially were assigned to work with me.
Inexperienced, often without even basic knowledge necessary to work in a chemical plant, the temporary workers suffered numerous injuries. According to company accounts, just one group of temporary replacements sustained 81 medical injuries, primarily from exposure to toxic chemicals. In a memo, the safety manager of the largest supplier of temporary contract labor notes, the large number of chemical exposures points to the lack of personal protective equipment as well as inadequate training.
There was times when I was working on another section of the plant, and this was after I'd been there a while, and knew what phosgene smelled like, and I'd smell some phosgene. And when you smell it, you get away from it, but you also try to look and see, make sure you're not going to be walking into it. And come to find out, that particular incident there, a supervisor was working with a pump on another unit that was just leaking, and there was nothing put out over on the radio or nothing. I just happened to be downwind of it and got caught in it at the time.
They're victims just like we are. They don't even know what they're handling sometimes. They don't know what's going to happen to them. They don't know that their children may be born with birth defects, and sometimes they'll call us and they'll say, I'm working with this, you know, I'm working with Carbon Tet, you know, give me my chances.
It takes well-qualified, conscientious people that are well-trained in what they're doing and have experience in the operation of those facilities. Any chemical plant operation is subject to catastrophe.
BASF's plants have known catastrophes before. In 1921, BASF's main plant in Ludwigshafen, Germany blew up in a tremendous explosion, killing 561 and injuring thousands more in nearby communities. In 1948, BASF's plant in Ludwigshafen blew again, killing 207 and injuring 4,000.
They're going to build in the Geismar area another Ludwigshafen, which is a plant over in Germany where they've got some 40,000 people. They've bought a tremendous amount of property, and of course, they don't come out and publicly say this, that health and safety concerns are expensive items, but so are lives.
The BASF Geismar facility represents a $750 million investment located on a huge 2,300-acre site next to the Mississippi. The plant is part of a highly integrated 12-plant complex at Geismar, which supplies BASF with chemical raw materials. BASF's plant consumes or produces immense amounts of highly toxic chemicals each hour of the day, including 12 tons of phosgene per hour, 41 tons of chlorine, 30 tons of ethylene oxide, 35 tons of isocyanate compounds, and 15 tons per hour of hazardous chemical waste. These chemicals are identical or analogous to chemicals used at Bhopal, India, Union Carbide's facility where 2,500 were killed and 250,000 injured in a chemical release in December 1984. In Louisiana, the locked-out workers put up billboards to remind their neighbors of the growing danger posed by the lockout. Like Bhopal, the problem at Geismar did not stop at the plant's fence. A series of unprecedented accidents at the plant during the lockout reinforced the union's concern. On April 2, 1986, a major phosgene release exposed 6 temporary workers. The gas invaded a supposedly impenetrable control room, hospitalizing 1 operator. Another 21 workers were exposed in a phosgene leak on November 16, 1986. On June 14, 1986, the plant began losing toluene into the air through a heat exchanger. Though they discovered the problem almost immediately, BASF management allowed the plant to run and the leak to continue for 55 hours when replacement parts were found. In all, 16,000 pounds of toxic toluene gas were released during the weekend. 4 miles away, downwind in Gonzales, 20,000 people celebrated in the town's annual Jambalaya festival.
I'm sure they're dumping a lot of chemicals out there because I know what the company used to want when we were there and we wouldn't do it, like dumping pumps to the pads and stuff. And you just don't dump a 20-gallon phosgene pump to the pad. That's just poisonous gas. It just covers a lot of area. That's what they want, though, so they can save money. They don't care about human beings is the way I would see it, you know. They just want money. It's wrong, but that's the way they're doing it.
I have lost 6 members of my family here in 9 years. and I mean young people, with cancer, liver cancer. 6 of them. We lost a little boy right side the fire station there. 17 years old, that boy died with cancer. Never smoked, never drank, never did none of that kind of stuff in his life.
We've got 5 places in my parish with groundwater contamination that's threatening my aquifers. You know, what am I going to drink? What are my kids going to drink? What are their grandkids going to drink? To me, this is a very basic, clear-cut issue. It's a moral issue. The earth is slowly but being destroyed, but it's definitely being destroyed.
In the nearby community of St. Gabriel, population 2,100, a small group of women of childbearing age suffered a series of 63 miscarriages in a period of just a couple of years.
It's normal for them to have spills, leaks, or whatever the way they explain it, and we don't know about it until it's in the paper, or the plume is over your home, the choking, the illnesses, the allergies, the health problems here are just normal. To me, it's obvious that the industry has a problem or a correlation with our health problems.
The towns of St. Gabriel and Geismar sit amidst 18 chemical plants, including the BASF Geismar facility, that stretch along the Mississippi south of Baton Rouge. According to data released by the National Cancer Institute, the area has one of the highest known cancer rates in the nation. The region, long known as Chemical Alley, got a new name: Cancer Alley. As information about the unsafe practices and community health problems grew, OCAW members began to think about their own experiences at the BASF plant. Some in the OCAW local had worked there since the plant opened. One night, a year into the lockout, the workers gathered around aerial photos of the plant to mark those areas where chemicals had been spilled or buried on the site.
We just didn't think about it. We didn't think it got out of the plant. We figured we making the trade-off, it's not affecting anybody else. It's just us. And that was it. We didn't figure stuff that we dumped on the ground, soaked into the ground, got into the water. We never thought, well, you know, when it gets down 2 or 3 feet, it'll solidify, and that'll be the end of it.
Locked out workers like OCAW Safety Committee Chair Roger Arnold depended on Louisiana's environment for food for their families' tables. Especially now, when money was so short.
The state of Louisiana is one of the most polluted states right now, as far as I can see, in the United States. And I don't want to lose my wetlands. I don't. I live in it too much to lose my wetland. And if I got to fight it to a state capital, well, then that's where we have to fight it at. Well, we got one in there.
In June of 1987, BASF's workers marched with Greenpeace in a demonstration at the state capitol in Baton Rouge. A new alliance was in the making, one between OCAW members and environmentalists in Louisiana.
The environmentalists are not just a bunch of kooks, that they have a genuine concern for everyone, and that they have a right to be concerned, that we have a right to be concerned, and that we're going to have to clean it up.
And that now that we're talking together more, we're finding that the people who work in the plant or are employed in these plants have information that help us, because we can tell them about health impacts, and it's very much a two-way street. They're helping us, we're helping them, and we're all getting together. We all want the same thing. We want safe chemical plants, we want safe communities, and we want very healthy families who have the workers at the plant.
Together, OCAW and local environmental groups began a campaign to protect the community from BASF's illegal environmental actions, a campaign that reinforced the union's campaign against BASF's illegal labor actions. The campaign began with the collection of information on the environmental practices of BASF and other Geismar area chemical companies.
We got what we call the Toxic Watch program here in Geismar, and we go out randomly during the day, at night, every other day or night, sometimes every day of the week. We never have the same pattern. And we come out and we pull air samples. We've detected ammonia at Arcadian, 225 parts per million, we're at peak.
The union's Toxic Watch produced some surprises, particularly at night. The flaring of bad product, the aerial discharges seemed to increase markedly after dark, after the state DEQ inspectors had gone home to their families. With information gathered in the field and from reports submitted to the state by the chemical industry, the new Labor Environment Coalition began to document what many in Cancer Alley had suspected all along. On October 21, 1986, OCAW joined the Sierra Club, the Center for a Clean Environment, the Louisiana Environmental Action Network, AWARE, and Ascension Parish Residents Against Toxic Pollution, to release a study of air toxics in the Geismar-St. Gabriel area. The study, based on the state's own figures, revealed that over 1 year, 196 million pounds of chemical pollutants were released into the air by the 18 Geismar area chemical plants.
If you've got 18 plants and we're talking almost 200 million pounds, we're talking statewide, we're talking maybe 1 billion pounds of pollutants per year, and they wonder why we have a high cancer rate. That might be something involved in it.
A second OCAW Sierra Club study released in January 1987 revealed that 15 Geismar area chemical companies, including BASF, released 75.7 million pounds of chemicals into the Mississippi River in 1 year.
If you're an environmental group and one of your members of this group have met the injury in fact test, which means just been affected, then the group has the standing to sue on their behalf. As far as I'm concerned, they don't have a leg to sue.
After a series of phosgene and toluene releases from the BASF plant in 1986, OCAW members helped organize the Ascension Parish Residents Against Toxic Pollution.
Could you imagine how many people would die? How can they get out from back there on Cocoa Land? How can they get out from back of the post office?
In its first year, the new group defeated 2 plans to dump hazardous waste in Geismar and won commitments from BASF and others to reroute chemical trucks away from their neighborhoods.
The community, I don't have no doubt in my mind we can stop them trucks from passing on this highway.
OCAW members joined with citizens of Ascension Parish to find out what the Environmental Protection Agency was doing about one of 3 Superfund waste dump sites around Geismar.
Your local representatives.
I'd like to speak as a mother of my children that when it rains, they like to go out when it rains in the ditches to see what little animals come out. I'm concerned about the water running off into the ditches. I'm not concerned about what's underneath the ground right now. We have learned not to trust anymore. I'm originally from New York, and we trusted the people in Love Canal.
In a series of actions, OCAW and local environmental groups moved to block further toxic releases by BASF into the environment. In November 1986, an environmental coalition contested a $66,700 fine for BASF's violation of 5 air quality regulations. In 1987, the Louisiana Attorney General intervened in support of the coalition. In March 1988, the Ascension Parish residents, in conjunction with OCAW, went into court to obtain an injunction against plans by BASF and others to drill injection wells for the disposal of hazardous chemical waste. In April 1988, the Labor Environmental Coalition went into court to stop BASF's application to build a chemical waste incinerator. During the hearing, BASF was forced to admit that the waste contained large amounts of a toxic metal and that their proposed incinerator design was inadequate.
Well, the attitude now is that we have to do something. You know, I'm 54 years old, and I'm not going to be around that long, and quite possibly they might not catch me. They might not even have anything to do with my death because I'm so old, but I have grandchildren coming up. I have a granddaughter that's just a year old. She's going to have to live here the rest of her life. And everything, we're going to clean it up. We're going to clean it up or we're going to shut it down.
Presidential candidate Reverend Jesse Jackson came to Baton Rouge to speak out against the destruction of the Mississippi River and in support of OCAW's locked-out members.
One of the chemical companies which contributed to the Rhine River disaster, with 2 accidental discharges, routinely dumped almost 1 million pounds of poisons into the Mississippi River last year through its discharge pipe, according to a Sierra Club report released January 13, 1987. And this same corporation has also dumped 370 of its Louisiana residents into the unemployment lines while its profits skyrocketed.
OCAW and its allies in Louisiana realized that they could not stand up against one of the world's largest corporations alone. So the workers made the decision to reach out to others who had been victimized by BASF, to others who had been locked out too. In 1987, a delegation of OCAW members and community and environmental leaders traveled to Germany to co-sponsor with the German Green Party a conference on the Rhine and Mississippi rivers, both victims of poisoning by BASF and other chemical companies. In Brussels, the International Chemical and Energy Federation, an organization of 200 unions in 65 countries, arranged a meeting with the 600,000-member German Chemical Workers Union, resulting in a donation of $10,000 to the Geismar workers. Helped OCAW obtain a complaint against BASF from the United Nations International Labor Organization. Obtained information for OCAW on the secret resale of mainframe computers to South Africa by BASF. OCAW organized a coalition of religious, labor, and anti-apartheid groups to protest these sales, forcing BASF to reduce its business in South Africa by $47 million. BASF workers in Brazil, Belgium, France, and Germany, comprising 90% of the company's worldwide workforce, joined hands to aid the locked-out OCAW members with contributions and support. Bernard Donig, a German chemical worker, headed up a Geismar Solidarity Committee at BASF's main plant in Ludwigshafen, collecting thousands of dollars for union families of Geismar workers. As national and international support for the locked-out workers grew, BASF attempted to silence the new Labor Community Coalition with a campaign of public misrepresentation, intimidation, and job blackmail. In job blackmail, opponents are threatened, remain silent, do not question my actions, or you may find yourself without a job. It was a threat BASF plant manager Les Story had made many times.
Not the 1940s, 1950s. The times have changed. We need to be competitive with the world, and in order to do that, both labor and management got to work together to solve this problem. And it may involve some jobs lost, but in the long run, it's going to keep Louisiana competitive, keep Ascension Parish competitive, and keep our company here in Louisiana.
Chemical industry, I guess, is like anyone else. They're not going to go where they're not wanted. And if they're not wanted, there are other states in this nation that want them. I don't see the problems in developing in Texas, or the questions being asked in Texas that are here in Louisiana.
But blackmail had its limits. few workers and community members believed BASF would walk away from a $750 million investment at Geismar. In response, management hired the world's largest public relations firm to try to convince the public that BASF was a responsible corporate citizen. The campaign misrepresented safety in the plant by not counting injuries to the temporary workers who actually did the work. BASF became a target of an investigation by the Criminal Justice Subcommittee of the U.S. House of Representatives concerning corporate misrepresentation of hazards to workers and the general public. A similar investigation by the West German legislature brought 2 members of parliament to the Geismar plant on April 10, 1986.
I think it's our duty to look what the German BASF is doing in the foreign country.
BASF refused the German legislators' written requests to tour the Geismar plant, and BASF security turned them away at the plant gate. The lockout of the German legislators was symbolic of the increasing attention the lockout was receiving nationally and internationally. In 1987 and 88, OCAW members traveled to BASF's annual meeting in Ludwigshafen to tell their story to BASF stockholders and confront the giant corporation's leadership directly.
On several occasions, we've gone to Ludwigshafen and addressed the shareholders and the chairman of the board, Hans Albers, and put that question to him very directly. And to our astonishment, the chairman of the board, Albers, and the directors refused to take responsibility for the actions of their managers in North America on questions of concerning labor and questions concerning environment. In essence, what they were saying was that, hey, we take responsibility for the rate of return, but we don't take responsibility for the economic and environmental wreckage it leaves behind.
As public outrage grew, the struggle came to BASF's U.S. corporate headquarters in Parsippany, New Jersey. On June 3, 1987, hundreds of protesters gathered at the facility's entrance to lock in the management who had locked out the workers and the community at Geismar.
If you fail to disperse within the next 5 minutes, you will be placed under arrest.
18 were arrested in a nonviolent protest against BASF's corporate abuse of workers and the community.
I do know this, that priests, ministers, rabbis do not want to have to conduct funerals for those who have been killed, workers, innocent members of the community, women and children, because of the toxic overflow from plants like the one in Geismar and the ones we have here in New Jersey.
We've got to have organized unions in all of these chemical plants because organized workers are really the first line of defense to not only protecting the workers, but protecting the community.
That we want that plant in Louisiana, at Geismar, Louisiana, the BASF plant, to have these locked out workers back in there. And I mean, we want it now.
On September 23, 1987, BASF notified the union that it was unilaterally putting its final offer into effect, with or without agreement from the locked-out workers. Either way, this meant the immediate termination of 110 maintenance workers and the right to replace any returning operator with a temporary worker the moment he set foot inside the plant. Not one worker stepped forward to suggest that the local even vote on the company's final offer. Today, 190 workers have been recalled to work. They have no contract, no grievance procedure, no seniority. But they do have their union. They haven't forgotten.
My husband was out there 18 years for nothing. This is a union. This is not, you know, one guy saying, okay, I'll go back, but you guys stay here, you know, y'all just starve. We don't operate that way. We don't want jobs for a few operators. We want the whole union back, you know.
Well, we don't feel it's being run safely. We feel the community is in danger.
They don't have the qualified people, don't have the skill and ability. We feel the people they had were trained. And we feel we want those people back when they have to protect the community.
They lock us out, they'll go back and lock somebody else out, and keep on down the line till the big company control the thing, control your labor.
We feel like we're winners, not losers. We don't intend to lose. We're going to keep fighting until we win.
This union ain't going to go away. We got a very simple message for this company and any other company that tries to rape the workers, foul the land, and destroy communities. We won't forget you, we won't surrender, and we will not retreat from what's rightfully ours.
The BASF workers in Louisiana have drawn the line. What they're doing here will benefit not only this generation, but future generations to come. Because when they clean that place up by their victory, there'll be a lot of children born without defects as a result of the struggle of these workers at this particular plant.
The company itself said it isn't the money. They don't want to bargain with the union. They don't want to treat with the union. This petty schoolboy bully attitude is a thing which, when found in a corporation of this size, is so evil and so corrupting. And that's what I see there. And so I feel that these men, I feel that they are among our true heroes.
Hello, this is Ralph Nader. I'm sure you have been stimulated by what you have just seen. To learn more about BASF in your community, or to find out how you can lend your abilities or your experiences to this struggle for worker, community, and environmental justice, call this number toll-free, 1-800-548-4740, or in Louisiana, 504-769-7939. For the workers in Louisiana and others who have been victimized by this company, thank you for your interest and concern.